Okay guys, here we go. So I've let my skin tone dry. It's been about a half an hour. If you were eager to do both in the same day, make sure you wait about a half an hour. So the one thing I did notice is that I do have some splotchiness where the paint dried a little bit here. Watercolor sometimes does that. It depends on how much water and moisture in some areas than the other. I'm gonna go ahead and just use some plain water and just kind of gently rub over some of these areas. It might help a little bit, it might not at all, but it's worth a shot. I could always pick up a little bit of my skin tone paint too, just a tiny bit, but then I'd have to be really careful to just to blend it out and not to leave it patchy. I have to kind of go all over to make that work, okay? All right, so today you get to paint everything else with one rule. You cannot paint something next to another something without letting it dry first. Because when water touches water, it's gonna mix, right? So you kind of gotta bounce around your project in order to let things properly dry. So I'm gonna go ahead and paint my apron first, knowing that it kind of touches some other things and I need to let that dry and then I can go back in. So I'm gonna make kind of like a navy color. Now you can go straight from your palette today if you want to, but like things like your hair color, things that are more unique to you, you're gonna wanna, you know, make your own. So I'm gonna grab that blue. I'm gonna make a little puddle over here. And I want it to be navy since it's a U of I apron and that's what color my apron actually is. So I'm dropping in some blue. I don't need a ton, but enough. And then I'm actually gonna go clean my brush just a little bit, not contaminate my paint colors. I'm gonna get my black going and I've added in there. And it's probably gonna be way too black. So I might need to rinse my brush, go back to my blue, pick up a little bit more blue in here. And yeah, black is a really strong color, so be really careful. I probably should have just grabbed like the tip of my paintbrush. So if that happens, instead of like trying to keep adding blue to it, I'm just gonna take a little bit of this black over here and then go add blue. That's probably a better approach at this point because it got too super dark super fast. All right, so now I'm gonna come in and I'm carefully painting. So doing those little skinny straps with the very tip of my brush, carefully going around the black eye. And then I'm sort of pulling down the pigment into the rest of the apron to kind of help spread my color out, make it still translucent since it is watercolor. I just gotta avoid my paintbrush over here on this side. I need a little bit more paint. So keep painting until your brush just seems too dry. Or if you need to make something a little bit more saturated by adding more paint to it and having the color being a little bit more vibrant. The more water you have, the more translucent and like pastel your colors will be. The less water you have or the more layers you do, the more opaque your color will be. Okay, we want that kind of happy medium. We want your colors to be vibrant and to bring you to life, but we don't want them sticky and opaque. That usually means that you are doing way too much grabbing from your paints in here. All right, so while my apron is drying, I'm gonna move up here. I did notice something from earlier. I forgot to do the very corners of my eyes. So I'm gonna go in and grab my skin color and drop that in quick. Just in these corners. So not in the whites of my eye, just in the corners. And now I'm gonna let that dry, okay? So now I am ready to move on to something else. I'm gonna go ahead and start my hair. It takes up a lot of space, but it's not touching anything else that is wet. So I have pretty generic brown hair, so I'm gonna go ahead and just go straight from the brown in here. But if I wanted to, I could maybe like overlap that with another layer, and I'll show you kind of what I mean by that. So I'm gonna work directly out of my palette. But whoa, that got really brown and I don't want that to happen. So I'm quickly gonna go back to my water and I'm gonna use that added water to help spread that paint out. So as long as you work fast enough, you can correct any crazy dark, I added too much paint at a time sort of situations. Anytime you're dealing with dark colors, this can potentially happen. So make sure I always kind of just hold my paper towel in one hand, and I always have my water close by. And I'm being very careful to stay in the lines, just using that tip of my paintbrush. And I'm pulling down the pigment towards the bottom. Oh, you know what I realized? I just put my whole arm over my Blue Apron. It's watercolor, you've got to be careful. Luckily it was mostly dry, so I only smudged a little bit of it. But, you know, worst case scenario, if you tend to be like me and kind of push your arm onto your paintings, you might just want to wait for something to dry before moving on. So turn on the TV, read a book in between. Watercolor is meant to be a little bit slower of a process. Okay, so I told you I would show you like how you could add a second color right on top. So let's say, sometimes I have like lighter highlights. You can't see it because my hair is pulled back today. But let's say I wanted to lighten up my hair. And if you're blonde, yes, you're gonna have to start with that yellow, but feel free to mix that yellow with a tiny bit of brown so that you're not, you know, Lisa Simpson colored. But I could take some of this yellow and sort of drop it in and kind of mix it on top to change the value of my brown a little bit to that warmer side. And usually, you know, somebody's hair is a little lighter on top than it is at the bottom. You could make that sort of ombre effect by adding more yellow down here and then adding, you know, more pigmented brown down at the bottom and kind of pulling up from there. So depending on what your current hair represents will depend on how you paint it. Okay, so I need to go ahead and do that on the other side. So again, grabbing my brown is really strong. So immediately dipping into water and then spreading carefully around my face because I don't want to accidentally get this into my skin color. I still need more water to help pull that pigment down. And then after I do my hair right now, the natural thing to do would be actually to go in and do my eyebrows so I don't forget them. You wouldn't believe how many people turn in this project and I have to give it back to them and ask them what they forgot, and it takes them a while, but then they realize that they didn't paint their eyebrows. And they usually laugh, because it's sort of funny. Alright, so I've kind of created that darker ombre down here. I need to match what I did on the other side, so I'm going in with that yellow. But I'm blending it in. Okay. All right. So once I feel like my hair is in a good place, I'm going to make this a little darker since it's behind. I'm going to soak this part up right there. And then again, I said I'm going to make this a little darker since it should be, because it's kind of like a shadow of like where my hair would be. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put in my eyebrows now. So go ahead and, again, my brown is very opaque, and I assume yours will be too. We have the same kind of paints, so really be careful. I added just a little bit of paint, and then I dipped my brush in water to help sort of pull that out. Do the same thing on this side. And being very careful as I go. And yes, your eyebrows should match your hair. Sometimes you can make them a little darker if you have blonde hair and maybe your eyebrows are a little bit more on the brown side. You could do that. Just be careful of making it extremely different, because it will just really kind of pop off the page and be a little like, ah, what's going on with that? Okay, so we said we're bouncing around. I'm going to go to my lips now, and we talked about this before, where we took our skin color and then we just added a little bit more red to it. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up that pigment. I'm reactivating it with some water because it did dry out a little bit. And then I'm just gently painting over the top. If I think it's changed too much, I'm going in with my paper towel and I'm wiping off and then just taking a little bit away because we want it to be subtle but different enough. Okay? So we don't want hot pink lips, we don't want orange lips, we don't want red lips. We want a nice natural, just sort of pinkish skin tone. Okay? All right, so at this point I am ready to kind of hop around and finish up my shirt, my pants, and my eye color. Your eye color is another place that you might want to do some pre-mixing over here, especially if you have like hazel eyes or green eyes that might have a little bit of blue in them or something like that. So take your time creating whatever color you think is necessary to make your eyes. My eyes are blue, but they've got a little green in them. So I'm going to go ahead and mix that color up. And then I don't want them to be super opaque. I want to be able to see my pupils, so I'm going to soak up a lot of that color with the tip of my brush so that there's not any like standing puddles after I paint them in. So this is the iris of your eye, and if you forgot to paint or color in your pupil with your Sharpie, wait till everything is dry and then put that back in. Don't try to paint it in because it'll bleed. Okay, so I'm ready to figure out what I want to do down here. You know, what color do I want my pants to be? I've got options. I'm an art teacher, so maybe I'll try something cool and maybe like do like a rainbowish shirt. Not that I really own that many rainbow shirts, but it just helps make my personality as an art teacher kind of come to life. So I'm gonna I'll start with red at the top and I'll kind of show you how this will work. And I'm being really careful to go around my apron. So I'm gonna make it kind of like a tie-dye effect. All right, so then while that's still wet, I'm quickly getting my orange and kind of putting that down, and it's gonna start bleeding because as soon as I touch that other color, it's gonna start doing its jab. And then I'm gonna come in with the yellow, cleaning my brush in between so that the colors don't run. And that yellow kind of went crazy, so I'm gonna pull a lot of this yellow down. And then I might have to come back with my red, and that's okay. Take my red. I just used too much yellow, that's all that happened there. But easy fix is just kind of pull it down, and I can go back and add a different layer later. So what comes after yellow is green, but I'm going to use this lighter green because it'll blend a little better with the yellow. I'll put it right here. And then we'll go down to our blue. That's a lot of pigment. Be careful because your paints do get kind of murky and soupy as they've been wet for a while. So you just got to be really gentle with only picking just a little bit of paint up as you go. So voila, I kind of made myself a rainbow-tastic shirt because that helps kind of make me stand out a little bit more like a art teacher. And I'm going in with this red violet just to help bring in the red a little bit more because that yellow is still really predominant. Cool. I like how that turned out, actually. All right, so then I would decide what am I going to do with my pants. I'm actually going to use that really dark blue that was almost too black, and I will make it look like I'm wearing like really dark jeans. And then I might even leave my Birkenstocks white because that's what color mine are anyways. whenever you want to do something white in watercolor, you want to leave it the white of the paper. You don't want to use white watercolor paint. So I'm actually just going to leave it as is. And maybe add a little bit of brown for the base of the shoes. Now I do have a horizon line here, so if I wanted to do a subtle background, I could go ahead and do that. It's really up to you and what you are feeling with your project. Do not feel like you are pressured into doing this, but I know some of you probably would want to add a little bit of something. So I'm just going to take this gray that I have, and I'm just going to add water and sort of pull down to create this sort of like gradient effect of just like where the edge is, and then kind of disappear down to the whites. So not necessary, not required, but if you have background or you drew, you know, we were talking about drawing like a grass if you were playing soccer or something like that, feel free to do what you would like with your background. Just make sure you don't forget like between the legs or anything like that. And yeah, so this is about it. I hope you enjoy painting. I'm gonna leave my earrings just kind of empty. I think if I try to paint those, it'll get a little crazy. But just double check all over everything to make sure you are 100% painted. White where it needs to stay white, so the whites of your eye and your teeth, and anything else that you want to be white. And then let it dry for at least 20 minutes or so before you try to take off your tape and upload to Artsonia. Remember, when you're uploading to Artsonia, the best way to do it is to use a smartphone or an iPad, and then hover over the top in good lighting to make sure that you get a great quality picture. Do not use your laptop camera, especially for this project. It just won't look nearly as nice as it could if you were using the iPad or a smartphone and using the QR code to scan. Alright guys, that is it. I'm gonna put a little brown in my paintbrush and call it a day. You guys have a good one, and I will talk to you later.